Greetings, everybody. Professor Henry here, talking to you about outlining, along with some precursor steps that would lead up to outlining, such as, for example, coming up with a topic. These are some steps that we will have done already in my course's writing project, where perhaps we started with listing topics in which you were interested in, narrowing your choice down so that you would focus on just one, and then with that, making sure that the topic fits with the parameters of our rhetorical situation and the assignment requirements. Okay, regarding that rhetorical situation, I like to think of the rhetorical situation in two ways. There's an inward facing rhetorical situation. This is this idea that we're writing for our class because this is an assignment, right? And so in that rhetorical situation, that inward facing rhetorical situation, we think about purpose maybe in terms of what's the purpose for doing this writing project. And for our audience, who's going to be reading your project? Certainly me as your professor, your classmates, that sort of thing. For genre, what kind of writing does this need to be as per the instructions and the assignment and so on? For stance, how do you want to present yourself through language? Do you want to come across as serious, professional, humorous? For media design, what citation and documentation style must you use? For any of my classes, that's going to be MLA style. It's an inward-facing rhetorical situation, writing for your class. But I also like to think of the rhetorical situation as outward-facing. And here's what I mean by that. It's writing for the world, right? You're not just writing for your English class, for your English professor, right? I want to think about ways where we can consider the rhetorical situation more broadly. So when we look back at purpose, maybe we can ask a question like, why do I personally want to write about this topic? For audience, who can conceivably read my work? And what do I want them to get out of it? Okay, we're going above and beyond writing for your English teacher or writing for your English class, right? Or writing for a broader audience in an outward-facing rhetorical situation. Genre, what kind of writing would best reach my audience and help me achieve my purpose? Stance, what tone would have the greatest effect on my audience? And media design, what are the best mediums through which to share my ideas? It's the same elements in the rhetorical situation: purpose, audience, genre, stance, and media design, but the inward-facing rhetorical situation versus the outward-facing rhetorical situation, and just invite us to think about these elements in different ways. I think it's a good idea to consider both the inward-facing and the outward-facing rhetorical situation. It's going to help make your work more meaningful for everyone, including yourself. Okay, so we have a topic. We've thought about our rhetorical situation with the topic. Our next step was to come up with inquiry questions, right? Questions that we were interested in seeking answers to through a research process. Questions like, what do I want to know more about? What are the key issues in this topic? What are the different positions within those key issues? What key issue do I want to focus on? So, for example, maybe a topic that we're interested in is smartphone and or social media addiction. We might ask, well, what are the effects of smartphone addiction? And that's a great start. I think it's a really important and interesting question. It is a bit broad, but still, it's a good start. It can help us get started to, start looking things up and see if we can start discerning what the effects of smartphone addiction are in general. But for the scope of papers like you would do in a first-year writing course like ours, a bit more focused, I think would be useful. So there are a couple of ways that we can focus a question like this one. I like to focus in terms of picking a specific like group of people or a demographic and frame the question around that. In this case, I've done it in two ways. I've looked at, how does this affect college students, and in particular, college students in writing classrooms. So I focused my question in two ways here. Okay, and then a research process will help us answer that question. And we might find as we start doing research to help answer this question that maybe the question was too focused at this point, and nobody has looked at this. That's fine. We just need to adjust our question and maybe zoom out a little bit, right? And then we will eventually find answers to our question. Assuming we are able to find an answer to this question, what the effects are of this issue or of this problem, well, now we can frame our question in a way that helps us explore the issue. For example, should college teachers in writing classrooms govern the use of smartphones? Okay. Now we've found an issue and one that's open to debate, right? Because people could look at this question and then start taking a position. That's the whole idea. Ideally, then, we'd be able to support that position with evidence from a continued research process. And once we've done some of that research, we found the conversation and we figured out what people are saying in this conversation, we can form our working thesis statement. And if we did a good job with our questions, coming up with a working thesis statement can be a fairly simple matter of just turning your question around and instead making a statement out of your question, right? Your thesis statement is an answer, or at least a tentative answer, to your central research question. So if our central research question was, should college teachers in writing classrooms govern the use of smartphones? Through our research process, maybe our working thesis statement and the answer to that question would be something like this. Because smartphone and social media addiction demonstrably distract students from learning, college teachers should adopt policies governing the use of smartphones in the classroom. Right? See how the thesis there is just an answer to the question? There we go. Once we have our working thesis statement crafted, now we can start working on our outline. Now we have a better sense of all of the major points that we're going to need to make in an essay in order to support that thesis. Figuring out what those main points are that you're going to need to develop and support for your thesis, and tentatively organizing all of those points, I promise you, will immeasurably help you write the first draft of the essay itself. This is the power of outlining. Okay, so here's an example outline for this topic on smartphone and or social media addiction as it relates to college students. So certainly we would start with an introduction. We all know essays have introductions. Maybe in that introduction we'd have an anecdote about how no one talks to each other while waiting for the class to start, right? Sort of a relatable example that's, when the audience reads, if they're college students, they will know and like, oh yeah, this is absolutely true to my lived reality. It's a good way to hook people in, right? To share some kind of a relatable example like that. Okay, maybe that would lead into our thesis statement. I don't want to go through and read the entire outline in detail. You're welcome to pause the video at any point, and you can read through the details on your own. At this point, I'm mostly just going to kind of highlight some stuff. So maybe the next phase in the paper would be to offer some background information. This is a place where we might cite some of the studies or some of the articles that we found in our research. Would then lead us into a place where we can talk about more specifically the impact of smartphone use on academics. One area where that might be a problem is where it comes to multitasking, right? When we are trying to use the same sensory channels in our bodies, listening and reading and all that, but we have multiple things going on in the same sensory channels. And it turns out that through our research, we found that that is a very inefficient way to learn. And that creates all kinds of other problems that are not in alignment with what our present purpose would be in a classroom, which is to learn. Another major point there, one phone to rule them all. One student working on their phone or being distracted on their phone doesn't distract just them, it distracts other students around them too. And that could be an important point to build on. As professors and teachers should be mindful of this. We're kind of getting in now to the area of supporting the, why should professors govern the use of smartphones, right? The reasons as to why we should do this. And since we're arguing a position, it also is rhetorically effective and expected, really, to also address opposing views. And then maybe that would lead us to our conclusion. There we have it. From here, we're ready to write the essay. So let's recap. Figure out our topic, come up with some key questions, frame some kind of an issue within the topic. Once we have those key questions and we've thought about it in terms of like in an issue where we might be able to take a position and support a position, right, we'll get into the research side of things after we've found and read and some sources and have a sense of the conversation around the topic and around the issue. We can figure out what our stance is, get our working thesis going. That's going to set us up to write an outline, because now since we have our working thesis, we'll have a better sense of the main points that we'll need to develop in order to support that thesis. This is a place where things, I think, kind of go back and forth, because as you're writing your outline, new things will occur to you, and you might need to go back and adjust your thesis. And as you adjust your thesis, or you think about your thesis more and you add to it and change it, you need to adjust your outline, right? So that these two things are in alignment, right? So in that process, things are going to go back and forth a little bit, and that's good. That's normal. That's to be expected. At some point, you want to get some feedback, and then you're ready to write out a draft. All right. There we go, everybody. That is where we are in our process. Hopefully that review of the outline was helpful and useful for you. Good luck. I look forward to seeing what you come up with.